Once upon a midnight dreary, as I wander weak and weary, through the midnight walk, a game that's not so cheery, I follow a road of darkness and depravity, only to find, within its confines, light and levity. Behind a creepy game crafted in clay is a beating heart, a burning spirit. Some iffy design choices, but it's still worth the visit. Now that I've set the stage, why don't you and me, with Potboy in tow, take that walk together, so I can finally stop butchering Edgar Allan Poe. The Midnight Walk is what you get if you played back-to-back sessions of Lost in Random and Little Nightmares, chased it with a viewing of Coraline, and then ate a lot of cheese before bed. And it comes to us from Moonhood, whomst I'm personally putting on a list for making this thing. It's called a grinner, by the way. Horrific. Like any creepy little fable, the world of the Midnight Walk is one bathed in darkness, the light of the sun having been stolen long ago. You are the burnt one who, once blessed with eyes to see and ears to hear, is thrust into a claymation-style wonderland. One full of ravenous, twitching beasts, heads without bodies, bodies without heads, and an entity called the Dark itself staring at you from within the shadows. At the same time, though, it's also the place Potboy lives, and we love Potboy. Together, the two of you must walk the midnight walk to Moon Mountain and bring back the light to the lands. Naturally, that walk isn't exactly a leisurely stroll, but as the old man says,
should you once again lose your way along the midnight walk, you're probably meant to.
As you follow the path, you're veered off course, thrust into the conflicts of other lonely souls upon the road. The general tasks you're undertaking are pretty straightforward. Returning bones to a grave, lighting candles, collecting pieces of a cauldron. But the Midnight Walk's true strengths shine through in its writing and its command of tone. Even if what you're doing more or less boils down to fetch quests, the story wrapped around it, the threads tugging at you to your ultimate destination, are so captivating that you don't feel it. Or I didn't anyway. Look, I love to wax poetic, and nothing gets me breaking out my overly flowery language quite like grim fairy tale adjacent life lessons about guilt, forgiveness, the beauty behind the darkness, and the darkness that can be born from seemingly noble acts. The Midnight Walk creates some beautifully poetic moments, both through its dialogue, but also through what is unspoken, mainly between Potboy and the Burnt One. Aside from a few grunts and squeaks, Potboy doesn't talk, and nor do you, but there's so much life injected into him through his childlike movements, whether he's reacting to something or just idling around. It's adorable. He's adorable. And I knew the second that cute little bastard came on screen, I was falling for an age-old trap in gaming that would ensure I would go to any lengths to keep that little pyromaniac safe, and I did. Thankfully, though he is a magnet for trouble in the story sense, he's not one in the mechanical sense. Potboy can't be spotted or harmed by any of the various entities you'll be running from, hiding from, or being eaten by. Which is great because as cute as the little guy is,
Mind over body.
He's not the brightest bulb in the store. Given that we, the player, have no idea where we're going, Potboy, I initially thought, was supposed to be our guide, especially since he keeps running on ahead of you. But I quickly realised I cannot trust the little dude to give direction if his life depended on it. If he wasn't running off into walls or clipping on ledges, he'd just sort of hang around out in the open. And since he doesn't jump into hiding spaces with you when the need arises, I eventually started using him as an enemy detection system, watching for when he'd ball up to tell me if an enemy was nearby, which worked a treat, but it was hard not to be snapped out of the moment a little bit when he'd bug out here and there. While you don't really engage with Potboy personally beyond feeding him coal, you can give him direction through a simple point, telling him where to go. Depending what's around him, he'll automatically act accordingly, be it standing on pressure plates, lighting fires, or my personal favourite, operating old-timey movie projectors. This symbiotic relationship works pretty well most of the time, mainly because there's only a handful of puzzles or encounters that require you and Potboy to rely on precise timing or movement. Occasionally though, there'd be points where the commands just wouldn't register or show up on screen unless I was right on top of them, which did create some unnecessary tension in already pretty tense situations. As much as I love the storytelling around the monsters you come across, their origins and how they interact with the world around them, let's be real, they're creepy as hell. The Grinners I mentioned earlier, they are nightmares. War of the Worlds shells with big fleshy faces inside that, when triggered, will hold their position for a few seconds and then sprint to your location at a moment's notice. They're probably my favourite monsters, partially because mechanically it's such a cool idea, tapping into a very real sense of dread, but also because I had the least fatal encounters with them out of the bunch. What you don't see is scarier than what you do. I've always known that to be true. The more you see of a creature, the less scary they become. The more often you die in a level, the more frustration replaces fear. This is where a few of the problems I've mentioned start to trip over each other. It's not always clear what you're supposed to be doing or where you're supposed to be going. I think part of that might be because of the art style. I think that makes details harder to distinguish, but also just some odd choices in level design at times. Like in the area with the Mog Room, for instance, I was creeping around for ages trying to work out what I needed to do, completely missing the giant mural behind me because I was so focused on keeping the major threat in my line of sight. Credit where credit is due though, the Midnight Walk does a very good job at putting you on high alert with very little effort. All I needed to see was that one little lip of a drop-down ledge or an enemy sleeping in the corner to know, oh goody, we're gonna have to run soon. Like I said though, prolonged exposure to the scary numbs the nerves to it, and the Midnight Walk does a good job of balancing that tension out with puzzles. These are fairly light work, usually making use of audio cues you can home in on by closing the burnt one's eyes to listen for. Initially, this is introduced as a way to move through the world, removing blocked passages marked by these glowing eyes. But as you progress, these are expanded upon in some really clever ways, like banishing enemies, or luring them into place in a sort of red light, green light trap. I was trying to explain to a friend the other day why I like this game so much. It feels like it understands its own limitations, and because of that, it prioritizes the feeling of moving through the world as much as it does the aesthetics of it. I have a theory that this is because the Midnight Walk is also compatible with VR. In fact, I wonder if it was initially developed as a VR exclusive, like Moss was on the PSVR and PSVR 2. My first playthrough was in regular mode, and I immediately noticed how smooth the motion was as you look around, as if to minimize motion sickness. A lot of the action intentionally has you looking towards the center of the screen, and there's long stretches of just taking in the world around you. That would also explain the lack of combat or rapid movements. As we all know, a lot of bobbing around isn't exactly VR's strong suit. I really wanted to jump on to give the VR mode a go, but I don't own a PSVR 2, and I'll be so honest, I couldn't figure out how to get the Quest link to work. So unfortunately I couldn't test it for myself, although from what others have said, it seems to run really smoothly. Although as a motion sickness girly, here's a dramatic reenactment of how I think that would have gone for me. Something that makes the Midnight Walk so interesting to me is that while it might remind me of other games in terms of style or setting, none do it the way Midnight does. It's entirely its own little entity. Its command of tone and ambience, not only creating but maintaining that creeping dread at what's behind every corner, while still managing to weave this quite beautiful narrative about forgiveness and compassion within that, it's something truly special. What else can I say? I bloody love it. Play.